Clarence had fallen for my friend. He brought her with him, publicly confronting his parents, and announced that he was going to break off our engagement. He pointed at me and said to both families, "I never liked her. Marrying her would only disgust me." That became the last day I liked Clarence. Later, other boys confessed their feelings for me. But he desperately tried to stop me from being with anyone else, holding the marriage certificate he had written for me when we were kids. "You promised that when we grew up, you would only marry me." When Clarence started arguing with my friend and his parents, I had just arrived. I stamped the snow off my shoes and was about to open the door. "I've told you before, I never agreed to that ridiculous engagement." The boy's cold laugh stopped me from opening the door. "That engagement was set by our parents when you were both very young. Are you bringing this girl here to embarrass your uncle and Aunt Chu?" I peeked through the crack in the door and saw Clarence arguing with his father. My parents were sitting quietly by the side, their faces dark. "This is my girlfriend," Clarence declared, holding Jenny's hand to assert his claim. His father turned bright red with anger. "You can only marry Caroline. You have no other choice." I trembled and unexpectedly pushed the door open. Everyone's eyes turned to me. Clarence's gaze was cold as he pointed at me, looking at his parents. His words were sharp. "I never liked her. Marrying her would only disgust me." After saying that, he didn't wait for a response and left, holding Jenny's hand. His eyes casually glanced at me. Behind them, I could hear Clarence's parents hurriedly apologizing, while my father looked furious, as if he wanted to chase Clarence down and beat him up. I just stared at the backs of the two of them as they left. Clarence and I had grown up together. All these years, he had never denied our childhood engagement. Even when people joked about it, he laughed along. I thought he liked me, just like I liked him. That night, after my parents took turns comforting me for 2 hours, I was finally allowed to go to bed. My mom had called in for me, so I didn't return to the dorm. As I was about to fall asleep, the phone on the nightstand lit up. It was a message from Clarence. "I'm downstairs. Come down, we need to talk." I remembered his words from earlier that day. My childhood friend, in order to be with another girl, had hurt me with cruel words. That night, I didn't go downstairs. But I couldn't sleep well. I had a fragmented dream. Young Clarence sat at a desk, carefully writing something. Soon, he finished and jumped off the chair. He ran up to my younger self. "Caroline, don't cry. When we grow up, you'll marry me." His small, soft hands pressed the marriage certificate he had written himself into my hands, his eyes bright and sincere. "I'll protect you, Caroline." The moon broke through the last bit of cloud, and its light flickered in my eyes. Half awake, I wiped away the tears at the corners of my eyes. The next morning, on my way to school, Clarence blocked me again. "You're leaving this late, did you skip breakfast again?" His familiar tone made me pause. He handed me a bag with breakfast inside. "What I said yesterday wasn't meant to hurt you. I was just angry, and that's why I said those things." I stepped back, avoiding the breakfast. "I don't need it. Eating your breakfast would just disgust me." Clarence pulled his hand back, staring at me. His voice dropped lower. "Does yelling at me make you feel better? Caroline, I hope you won't cause trouble for Jenny. She hasn't done anything wrong. I was the one who liked her first." I have to admit, Clarence's words were rather prescient. But it was Jenny who had instigated things. We arrived at school one after the other. As soon as I sat down at my desk, Jenny walked over holding a cup of milk. Everyone's eyes turned to us. "Caroline, would you like some milk? Can you forgive me?" I glanced at the milk, then looked at her. "What did you do wrong that I need to forgive?" Jenny put the milk on my desk, her eyes slightly red. "I shouldn't have sent the follow request on Clarence's Instagram. I didn't know he was your boyfriend at the time." Her voice choked slightly as she tugged at my sleeve. "Caroline, please don't be angry. I promise I can give him back to you." I was about to speak, but another voice interrupted me. It was Jenny's good friend. She laughed in anger and spoke up for Jenny. "Jenny, why are you apologizing? She and Clarence are just friends, right? You didn't steal her boyfriend, so why apologize?" Also, Caroline, can you stop acting so high and mighty? Stop pretending like you don't care. Their bickering pushed the drama to its peak. You two are playing a part, one acting as the good person and the other as the bad one, right? I pulled my hand away from Jenny's. I didn't use much force, but she stumbled with a scream, falling to the side. Ah! She slammed into my desk, spilling the hot milk all over herself. Clarence walked in just at that moment. Jenny, are you hurt? He quickly took off his jacket and draped it over her, his face full of concern. It's fine. The onlookers all cast reproachful glances at me. Why are you staring at me? She ran into me herself. I found it a little funny. Clarence hadn't been deaf to what happened, but his focus was entirely on Jenny. I'll carry you to the infirmary. Hold on. He picked Jenny up horizontally, not even glancing at me as they left. From beginning to end, I was invisible to him. In the afternoon, Jenny's friend couldn't stand it anymore and got her revenge. She purposely bumped into me, spilling her water on me, then shoved me down. Sorry, I didn't mean to. She shrugged and walked away nonchalantly. I looked up and met Clarence's gaze, from not far away. He just looked down at me coldly, his expression indifferent, like I was a stranger. Just before the class bell rang, I walked into the classroom, my wet body still dripping. I was holding a bottle with warm, pale yellow liquid inside. Before anyone could react, I opened the bottle. The liquid poured over her head, drenching her thoroughly. I did it on purpose, and I'm not going to apologize. She shrieked and jumped up. What is this? What did you pour on me? I curled my lips into a smile, not explaining. Only when this incident blew up did I clarify to the teacher. It was just a bottle of hot water, with 2 tea leaves. After this, I was ostracized by the whole class. Everyone kept their distance from me. I even started questioning myself. Did I do something wrong? If I did, then why was I the one being excluded? Meanwhile, Clarence and Jenny had become the class couple, the perfect pair of top students. The day they publicly admitted their relationship was also the day I confronted Clarence. Are you coming to the class party on Friday night? The class monitor hesitated for a long time. After asking everyone, she still came to test the waters with me. I kept my expression calm, but the hand I hid under the table involuntarily clenched. Join in, I thought. Maybe I wasn't as disliked as I thought. In the club, everyone sat together, playing Truth or Dare. The bottle landed on Clarence. Someone asked with a mischievous grin. If your Caroline and your rumored girlfriend Jenny fell into the water at the same time, who would you save? At the time, I didn't think it would be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Clarence and the others were sitting right across from me. The air instantly froze. I lowered my gaze and stared at my juice, not blinking once. I knew I could make an excuse to leave the room. But for some reason, I didn't move. The guy across from me suddenly chuckled lightly. His tone was neither too fast nor too slow. What do you mean by rumored girlfriend? She's my girlfriend. Didn't I tell you guys? Out of the corner of my eye, he casually draped his arm over Jenny's shoulder and asked. Jenny, can you swim? No. The girl was a bit embarrassed. Clarence sighed softly, his words full of affection. Well, if you fall into the sea, I'll have to carry you and swim all the way, right? He didn't directly answer the question, but the implication was clear. It was obvious. Jenny was his girlfriend. Saving his girlfriend first was only natural. I gently closed my eyes, trying to hide the bitterness in my gaze. The others started teasing. I barely breathed, lowering my presence even more, afraid of being met with pitiful, mocking eyes. But Jenny didn't seem ready to let me off the hook so easily. When it was my turn, she smiled sweetly, looking harmless. With a soft voice, she asked. Caroline, is there anyone here you like? Even if you liked them in the past, it counts. She said the meanest things in the most playful tone, making everyone think she was just joking. If you're lying, your whole family will die a terrible death. I felt cornered, as if there was no escape. If I stood up and caused a scene, I'd probably be permanently isolated. The others would start looking at me with strange eyes again. I raised my eyes slightly and met Jenny's gaze. Yes. As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt Clarence's sharp look on me. Jenny smiled and linked her arm with Clarence's. I see. If this had happened before, I would have felt embarrassed, trapped with no way out. But somehow, after admitting I'd liked Clarence, that feeling seemed to drift far away. It was like the faintest breeze swept away the last remnants of my unspoken feelings for Clarence. The wind passed, and the surface of the water remained undisturbed. At 17, I let go of my 3-year-long crush. I finally realized I didn't like Clarence anymore. Caroline. The party was winding down, and just before I was about to leave, Clarence called out to me. He walked up, his expression complicated. Today, you said you liked someone. He paused for 2 seconds before continuing. Was it me? Honestly, I couldn't summon any feelings for the guy in front of me anymore. Yes. I added, but that was in the past. The moment you pointed at me and said marrying me would be disgusting, I decided I didn't like you anymore. Besides, you have a girlfriend now. I've really moved on. Clarence pressed his lips tightly together, silent. I didn't mean to hurt you. I've always thought of you as a little sister. I didn't want to hear his pale words anymore. Caroline, I'll make it up to you. Though I immediately rejected him. And showed with my actions that I truly wanted to distance myself from him and his girlfriend. But Clarence wouldn't listen. He kept doing pointless things to fill the void of his guilt. He insisted on bringing me breakfast, even though I threw a back at him every time. His occasional thoughtful gestures. Jenny couldn't see me avoiding him, and thought I was trying to steal Clarence away. She started making things difficult for me one after another. The day before the exam results were released, Jenny was called to the office alone. When she came back, she was crying on the desk. Rumors started spreading that she had cheated in the exam. Neither Clarence nor her friends believed Jenny had cheated. After all, she was the second top student, just behind Clarence. Impossible. That cheat sheet they found couldn't possibly be hers. Yeah, Jenny isn't that kind of person. I didn't pay much attention. But I remember that I did well on the exam. After checking the answers, I found I had made far fewer mistakes than before. When the results came out, before I had time to celebrate, Clarence blocked my path after school. Caroline. Did you do it? I was confused. What? Frame Jenny for cheating. Wasn't it you? Wasn't that cheat sheet you planted? He questioned me coldly, closing in step by step. Am I that free? I scoffed. Do you really think I care about her enough to cause trouble? Clarence stared at me with sharp eyes. Then why did your score go up this time? Can't it just be that I studied harder? I couldn't take it anymore. Clarence, stop being so paranoid. His face was shadowed. Suddenly, he sneered. Caroline, how did you turn into this? Frame someone, and you still haven't repented. Clarence shook his head, eyes full of disappointment. Is this how your family raised you? I laughed in anger, about to retort. But Clarence pressed his phone screen and put a surveillance video in front of me. After the exam ended, before the lunch break, I was the only one who entered the office. This was Jenny's plan. The cheat sheet had been deliberately placed in her test paper. She knew those questions, so no one believed she had cheated. And with this video, I was directly convicted. Clarence looked down at me, his gaze cold. And he tossed a final remark before leaving. Everyone has to take responsibility for their actions. I pinned my last hope on the teacher. After all, this was a matter that couldn't be settled with solid evidence. It relied on everyone's subjective judgment. But the teacher just looked at me with reproach. What's your purpose in doing this? Are you jealous that Jenny did better than you? My throat went dry in an instant, and all my strength drained away. I couldn't say a word. When Clarence accompanied Jenny into the office, she was still tearfully pleading. Aren't we supposed to be close friends? I always thought of you as a good friend. Is this how you treat me? She grabbed a thick book from the desk and slammed it into my face, while crying. You almost ruined my life with this. Do you know that? Clarence just turned his head away, silent. The teacher casually scolded Jenny for hitting me. She gave me a warning look before I could strike back. Then changed the subject. Caroline, apologize, and I won't cancel your exam results. If my results were cancelled, I would be placed in the advanced class for the final year. But how could I admit to something I didn't do? I'll say it once, I didn't frame Jenny for cheating. As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt a sharp pain in my nose. Jenny had slapped me hard enough to draw blood. I didn't care about the shocked looks from the three of them and walked away. Stop. Clarence chased after me, blocking my way. He saw my bleeding nose and frowned. But what he said was still reproachful. You have to apologize to Jenny. She shouldn't have to bear this shame because of you. I lightly wiped my nose and showed him my hand. Speaking in a soft voice. Can I go clean up first? I felt utterly exhausted. It was like someone hanging on the edge of a cliff, unable to hold on to the life-saving branch anymore. I didn't even want to argue with him. Clarence furrowed his brow. I'll take you. Saying that, he reached out to pull me. But I took a small step back, lowering my eyes, void of any emotion. Clarence. I said softly. Please. Get away from me. In the end, I still didn't apologize to Jenny. But it seemed like everyone just assumed I was framing her. Even the classmates who had ignored me before began to gossip behind my back. The exam paper I thought I did better on was also disqualified. My emotions, which appeared stable, were actually on the verge of collapse. That day, we were supposed to attend a summer camp organized by the school. No one was allowed to skip without a valid reason. So, once again, Jenny found another chance to frame me. Jenny and Caroline, you're in the same group. Go pick up some branches. Once we entered the dense forest, Jenny's true nature was exposed. I quietly took out my voice recorder from my bag. Caroline, must be so upset that I stole your man, huh? She stood behind me, speaking leisurely. I guided the conversation. So, you deliberately planted that cheat sheet on me to make Clarence hate me, so I couldn't take him back? She glanced around before smiling and answering. Yeah, no one believes you're innocent. How does it feel? Was it painful when that book hit your face? I got the information I wanted and decided not to drag it out. With this recording, she would be finished, disgraced, punished, and probably transferred. But she wasn't satisfied. Just as I turned away, she suddenly shoved me hard. Ah. I tumbled down the slope, and Jenny, in her smug moment, twisted her ankle and rolled down with me. We both got stuck on a tree trunk on the slope, hanging dangerously. I tried to pull myself up, but it was useless. Clarence must have heard Jenny scream, because he was the first to rush over. Clarence, I'm so scared. She looked at him pitifully. His gaze towards me was full of sympathy. I'm sorry, Caroline. He reached his hand out to Jenny. As soon as Jenny gets up, I'll help you. Jenny froze when she heard this. She began climbing up with Clarence's help. I pressed my lips together. Okay, thank you. I had no reason to complain. Jenny was his girlfriend, so it was only natural he'd help her first. The fact that he was willing to help me, even a little, was already beyond my expectation. I had thought he wouldn't risk it and would just go back to get a teacher for me. But as Jenny climbed, she suddenly stepped on my hand. She kept grinding it, her other foot hanging in the air, as if she accidentally stepped on me. I winced in pain and instinctively let go. I rolled further down the hill. Caroline. Caroline. I could hear Clarence and Jenny calling my name. She still didn't forget to act, playing her part fully. Luckily, the leaves below were thick enough, and the slope wasn't too steep. I eventually stopped when my back hit a tree trunk. I had multiple scratches and bruises on my body. The only serious injury was the impact on my back. I slowly propped myself up against the tree, and that's when I realized the biggest problem. I was lost. There was no signal on my phone. Meanwhile, Jenny was doing everything she could to stop anyone from rescuing me. In the end, I relied on the compass on my phone and stumbled my way out of the forest. But when I got back to the meeting point, I found everyone had already left. I stopped dialing the teacher and coldly laughed before calling my parents. The injury wasn't serious, but I had to stay in the hospital for observation for a day. Clarence came to my hospital room after my parents returned home that evening. Caroline. His voice was hoarse. At that moment, I was staring out at the dark sky. Clarence. I slowly spoke, only noticing him out of the corner of my eye as he approached. Today, while I was trying to find my way out of the woods, I suddenly remembered our school trip to the forest park. I paused and looked at him. Do you remember? He looked confused, clearly not recalling. I continued, emotionless. That time I was bitten by a snake, even though you knew it wasn't poisonous, you still carried me to the hospital right away. It was so hot that day, and you ran the whole way, drenched in sweat, but you never put me down. Because you knew I was afraid of pain. I was lying on your back and I thought. I sighed softly. I really liked you, Clarence. How could people change so quickly? Why did the boy who used to take care of me in every little detail, always put me first, now say I was disgusting? Why did he allow others to hurt me? Even when my life was in danger, he chose to do nothing. Clarence's eyes were full of regret. He couldn't argue. All he could do was apologize. I'm sorry, Caroline. I was wrong, really wrong. Please forgive me, I won't leave you alone again. I took a deep breath. Looking at him, I raised my hand and slapped him. How dare you ask for my forgiveness? I stared at him. Go save Jenny first. She's your girlfriend. I can't blame you. But you knew it was dangerous when I fell, even though we've only known each other for 10 years, we're just classmates. Couldn't you at least tell the teacher or call the police? You're as cold-blooded as an animal. What if I hadn't made it out of the forest? I might have never had the chance to hear his useless words. Clarence looked defeated, unable to stand. He knelt by my bed and reached out to hold my hand. His voice trembled, his dark eyes full of pain. I'm sorry, Caroline. I forgot, I really forgot. Jenny's situation was just too urgent. I tugged at the dry corner of my mouth, avoiding him. What kind of urgency could she have had, considering she didn't even fall? Get out. Clarence didn't move, but looked at me pleadingly. When my gaze shifted to the glass on the bedside table, Jenny pushed the door to the room open. But she looked worse than me, sitting in a wheelchair with a sickly expression. Caroline, don't blame her. Why? Her eyes were slightly red, on the verge of tears. Because I twisted my ankle, I was so afraid of the pain, I begged him to take me to the hospital first. Yes, that's how urgent her situation was. I'm sorry. I thought my boyfriend would always put me first, I forgot that he was different, he still has you, his childhood friend. I was selfish. She sobbed as she tried to stand up. Just before she fell, Clarence rushed to catch her. Then he carried her back to the wheelchair. The moment he turned to look at me, I suddenly lost control of my emotions. I crashed everything near me towards the two of them. Clarence shielded Jenny. And a piece of glass hit him on the forehead, drawing blood. Get out. I can't stand looking at you two for another second. I glared at them, every word heavy. Both of you disgust me. Jenny was considerate as always. Pulling at Clarence's sleeve, ready to leave. Clarence stared at me silently for a long while. Before they left, as they opened the door, I suddenly spoke. Jenny. The figure in the wheelchair froze. Before I fell down the hill, you gave me a gift. I stared deeply at her back, my hand unconsciously clutching the blanket, trembling. I will make good use of it. She paused for just a second before leaving, unaffected. To Jenny, everything she did seemed flawless. Add to that her repeated victories, leaving her unscathed each time, and it was inevitable she'd get a little carried away. So, she didn't take my words seriously. In fact, right after leaving, she sent me a video she'd recorded earlier, taunting me. It was probably a video she secretly filmed with a camera she set up in advance. Jenny had only sprained her ankle. But Clarence, worried there might be other injuries, insisted on her staying in the hospital for observation for a day. In the video, Jenny was holding Clarence's waist, her voice soft. Do you blame me for not getting you to save Caroline in time? Clarence gently patted her head, letting out a small sigh. No. Jenny held him even tighter. Because you're my boyfriend, I was scared and could only turn to you. I thought I was the most important person to you. The video was blurry, but Clarence's voice rang out clearly in the hospital room. Jenny, you're always the most important person to me. Just after he said that, he cupped her chin and leaned in to kiss her. Right after this video, there was a message. Now you know why he didn't go down to the hill to find you. I stared blankly at my phone for a moment before shutting it off. I found myself wondering, what was I doing when they kissed? Oh. I was anxiously trying not to get bitten by a snake, enduring the pain in my body. Slowly making my way out of the forest on my own. The wind that evening was colder than usual. Even though I already had a recording proving that Jenny was the mastermind behind the cheating in the exam. It was tricky, because I had also been pushed down the hill by Jenny. But there was no evidence for that. A recording would hardly be enough to bring her down in my eyes. Just as I was considering whether I should only submit the recording, Erica, a classmate, came to me. After we got back to school, during free time. She came over to me when no one was watching. I saw everything. I glanced up at her. She continued, I was trying to explore a secluded area that day and saw Jenny push you. She also lied to the teacher, which is why no one came to help you. Seeing I wasn't responding. Her face flushed a little as she slowly explained. I was too scared to speak out at the time. What if you had died there with no one to prove what happened? I was afraid Jenny might target me. It was a natural reaction. After all, if someone would push me down, they would likely have no qualms about valuing a life so little. I remained calm, trying to get more from her. You saw it, but it doesn't matter. The evidence won't be enough to convict her. Erica looked around, hesitating to speak. I waited in silence. Caroline, your family is wealthy. If I give you this evidence, can you really get her put in jail? She bit her lip, clearly scared. Because if you can't get her jailed, I'm afraid she'll come after me. I nodded, then smiled suddenly. You know, Jenny is already an adult. This meant the law couldn't be lenient with her anymore. Erica finally looked relieved. She took out her phone and showed me the video. From her angle, it clearly captured Jenny intentionally pushing me. As for the lie she told the teacher, there were more witnesses. According to Erica, after Jenny and the others returned, she sent Clarence away to help her find a car to take her to the hospital. Then, when everyone was about to leave and look for me, Jenny stopped them. Teacher, Caroline told me she wasn't feeling well and left early. I saw her family's car pick her up. The teacher was skeptical. I'll need to call her parents to confirm. Jenny visibly panicked. Why is there no signal? The teacher frowned at her phone. Jenny didn't give her a second chance to call. Don't you trust me? Isn't it normal for Caroline to leave early? After all, her family is so rich, it's normal she couldn't handle this place, right? I had already sensed the teacher's inexplicable bias against me during Jenny's slander. And how much she liked Jenny. At first, I thought it was just because Jenny was a good student. But now I realized it wasn't all about that. She probably had a deep-seated resentment toward wealth. Jenny had used this to her advantage, subtly bringing up my family background, fueling the teacher's dislike of me. At the right moment, Jenny shifted the topic, pretending to be in pain. My ankle's really swollen. Can you call my parents for me? Her actions flowed smoothly. And I lost any chance of being helped. Jenny was completely finished. But suddenly, I didn't want to see her destroyed right away. During Tuesday's break, I snuck into the broadcasting room when no one was paying attention. I hit record on the microphone. How did it feel? Was it painful when that book hit your face? Jenny's voice echoed clearly into everyone's ears. Unfortunately, I couldn't see her expression at that moment. Although I was scolded by the head of discipline for this, Jenny's reputation was shattered. Wait, Jenny really wrote those notes herself? My God, she's always been a goddess to me, how could she be this disgusting? The students' voices were full of unrestrained gossip. I watched as Jenny's face turned pale. At the same time, Clarence didn't look too good either. He stopped me while I was getting some hot water. His eyes full of panic and apology. Caroline. I misunderstood. I twisted the lid of the cup and spoke calmly. Say what you need to say, all at once. After a long pause, he finally spoke. Can you forgive me, Caroline? His tone was tentative. Without hesitation, I splashed the water into his face. It wasn't very hot, but it was enough to make him look pathetic. If you were me, do you think you could forgive me? Clarence stood still, letting me pour the water. The droplets fell from his hair, and he looked down, a sad smile on his face. Do you really hate me that much? That you don't even want our 10 years of friendship? The early spring wind was still cold, almost biting. Especially with Clarence's school uniform soaked. His shoulders shivered from the cold, yet he still stubbornly waited for my answer. Clarence. You don't have the right to bring up those 10 years. The moment my words fell, the hope in his eyes faded instantly. As he turned to leave, a quiet question came from behind. Really, can't you forgive me? How could I forgive him? How could I forgive someone whose actions made me completely let go of over 10 years of childhood affection in just 2 months? Just when Jenny thought this was the end, I sent her another message, leading her to the equipment room. It was a screenshot from the video Erica had sent me. What else do you want? Jenny gritted her teeth, her face pale. It seemed she hadn't been doing well these past few days. I held up a nearly 6 centimeter thick chinois dictionary. Weighing it in my hand. Slap yourself, and stop when I say so. Or should I do it? Your choice. Jenny was afraid I'd hold a grudge and take revenge. So she held back her anger and began slapping herself. The red marks on her face deepened, swelling unevenly. Suddenly, footsteps came from outside the equipment room. I panicked. 2 girls alone. One with a swollen, red face. With Jenny's personality, I would probably be labeled as a school bully. As I froze for a moment, the footsteps grew louder. I looked at the door that had a small gap. Just as I stood there, startled, the door was closed. Which meant, someone outside had shut it for me. A kind act. After Jenny made her own nose bleed, I stopped her actions. Please. She muttered, barely moving her lips, afraid to make the wound worse. Don't give the video to the police. I let out a light laugh, mocking her absurdity. I pushed the door open and walked straight out. All done? A small voice suddenly came from the door, making me jump. The Good Samaritan who helped close the door was Erica, who had happened to pass by. I'll keep an eye on things. No one saw you hit her. I didn't hit her. From the start, I had planned not to lay a hand on her. Jenny slapped herself, so they couldn't pin anything on me. Thanks. I nodded at her and was about to leave. Caroline. Her face was filled with hesitation. A few seconds later, she shoved a drink into my hands without a word. I'm sorry, I didn't know the truth before, and just went along with everyone isolating you. She spoke so quickly, one long breath in between. If you need any help with your studies, or anything else, you can come to me. Goodbye. After that, she turned and quickly left without looking back. I stared at the warm drink in my hands. This was the first act of kindness I had received since I was isolated. That afternoon after school, I took the video to the police station. I stood at the school gate, watching Jenny being taken away by the police. She was crying and shouting. Please, don't take me away, I'm about to apply for college. Please, don't. The police car slowly shrank from my view until it disappeared. For some reason, I thought back to the time when Jenny was even ranked higher than Clarence, the top student of the year. I remembered her back then, full of bright-eyed optimism. At the same time, the teacher involved couldn't escape the consequences. Her negligence, her strong biases against students, and her inability to differentiate right from wrong would ultimately cost her. Before being dismissed, she came to find me. She hoped I would write a letter of forgiveness. Why should I? I couldn't hide my disgust. Letting someone like you continue teaching is irresponsible to the students at any school. People like you should be crushed under the feet of those you despise the most, groveling and crawling, because that's what you deserve. The class got a new teacher. Soon, people realized it had all been a misunderstanding of me. They started talking to me, asking if I wanted to go out for lunch. But I started feeling out of place. It wasn't pretension. I had gotten used to being alone. I told myself, being by myself had its benefits. But as I grew more accustomed to being alone, I started feeling the need for another kind of noise. It was inevitable that I'd develop some exclusivity. So when the class leader asked again if I wanted to join the class party, I thought for a moment and shook my head, declining. But not every group activity could be avoided. For example, the cultural committee member took it upon herself to sign the whole class up for a choir. At that time, I didn't expect that the girl who had been ostracized 2 months ago would now become the center of attention. On the day of the arts festival, after I changed into my outfit, I hesitated for a long time before coming out of the bathroom. The clothes seemed to be the wrong size. The top was a bit too short. Caroline. Clarence had been cooperating with the police investigation in fits and starts lately, so he barely came to school. I stopped in my tracks, frowning. What do you want now? Clarence hadn't done anything wrong per se, but because he had been involved in everything, he got a written warning. He didn't mind my coldness, his eyes growing darker. I broke up with Jenny. Before, I didn't know about all the wrong things she had done. I was about to speak, but he cut me off. I know you hate me. He gave a self-deprecating smile and tugged at the corner of his mouth. I came here today just to explain, I really didn't know about what she had done. Whether you believe me or not, Caroline, I've never had ill intentions toward you. If it wasn't for Jenny's manipulation. He leaned weakly against the wall, shaking his head with a bitter smile. We never would have ended up like this. Clarence, you really are pathetic. I rubbed my forehead tiredly. Are you really at peace with putting all the blame on Jenny? Did someone force you to be with her? Clarence raised his gaze to meet mine, a helpless look flooding his expression. So, what should I do, Caroline? I don't know what to do to make you not hate me so much. His eyes suddenly darkened, and his expression became unreadable. I don't know what's wrong with me. Caroline, I think I couldn't take it anymore, and I didn't want to hear what he was about to say. I bypassed him and walked toward the backstage dressing room. Before stepping on stage, I unknowingly raised my hand, and a glimpse of my waist was caught in a photo. The picture was then posted to the confession wall. This girl is my type, please share her contact. Wow, she looks amazing, such a good waist, I want her contact too. I've seen her, she's probably the one performing on stage for this class. The post went viral quickly. It wasn't until I returned backstage and was blocked by a group of people that I understood what was happening. Can I have your phone number? A shy boy, his ears slightly red, was half pushed toward me by his friends. I was confused and was about to refuse when Clarence cut through the crowd and walked toward me. Caroline, congratulations on your performance. He smiled and handed me a bouquet of flowers. Who's he? I overheard someone whispering nearby. I don't know, but it looks like he's Caroline's boyfriend. The voice wasn't quiet, at least both Clarence and I could hear it clearly. Someone came up to ask. Is he your boyfriend? They pointed at me and asked Clarence. He didn't deny it, just raised an eyebrow. So don't ask for her phone number. I found it amusing. I walked up and shoved the flowers back into Clarence's arms. I'm not with him. I said this and left without looking at Clarence's darkening face. But it seemed like he couldn't let go. That evening after school, he followed me the whole way. Caroline, we already had an engagement. Today, I didn't deny it, just to stop them from spreading your phone number. I looked at him for 2 seconds, suddenly realizing he had never understood that he was wrong. Do you remember when you wrote me a marriage certificate when we were little? I turned my head, my gaze drifting off to one side. My voice was calm, but with the sudden drop in temperature, it sounded colder than usual. Back then, I was too young, and although I didn't understand the meaning of marriage, I knew that meant we could always be together. That made me feel safe. I looked at the boy in front of me, his eyes red. Because you said you would always protect me. But you broke the engagement you proposed and didn't do anything you promised. Clarence collapsed to his knees at my feet. He tightly held my hand. Don't say any more, Caroline, I've made so many mistakes. I slowly pulled my hand away, looking down at him. Yes, you made mistakes. The harm you caused me can't be erased. Clarence, I'll never forgive you. So please, stop following me. He didn't agree that day. When he left, he said he might have fallen for the wrong person. That night, I suddenly remembered that I hadn't thrown away that marriage certificate. After rummaging through my things, I found it, didn't look at it again, and ripped it into pieces, throwing it into the trash downstairs. For the next while, Clarence didn't bother me. But since we were in the same class, I could always catch him staring at me blankly whenever I turned around. I suppressed the frustration and tried not to pay attention to him. But one day, Clarence finally tore off his disguise. That was the last time I saw him, right before graduation. Even though I didn't give that guy my phone number that day, he would still occasionally barge into our classroom between lessons, bringing me little snacks. I had no choice but to return them, which would waste the entire break. Later, I started avoiding him so much that I probably really pissed him off. One day after school, he publicly confessed his feelings for me right at the school gate. His look of determination, combined with the cheesy, awkward confession, felt like pressure. "Sorry," I said in a businesslike tone. "I don't like you." "She doesn't like you." "Are you done yet?" Clarence, of course, noticed this scene. Today, there was a thin layer of anger on his face. The guy turned around, confused, and glared at him. "What's your relationship with her?" Clarence sneered and walked over, delivering a punch that sent him stumbling a few steps back. "She's obviously with me." With that, they started fighting. The recent academic pressure, plus Clarence's occasional meddling, was suffocating me. It felt like I couldn't breathe. Before things escalated further, they stopped fighting. It was a relief we didn't end up at the police station, but my frustration had reached its peak. On an empty street, Clarence stood in front of me with his head down, looking like he'd done something wrong. "I didn't mean to bother you, Caroline. I know you don't like him. I just wanted to help you get rid of him." "Clarence." My voice rose without me realizing it. "Please, stop doing these pointless things. All you're doing now is making me feel uncomfortable, do you understand? When I was bullied, you didn't show up, and now there's no need for you to." He stayed silent for a while, then spoke again, his voice weak. "I'm sorry." He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his bag. "After you threw it away, I picked it up and carefully put it back together. The wedding certificate was wrapped with layers of tape." His voice cracked, and his hands trembled. "You promised me, when we grew up, you'd only marry me." I barely remembered that day. I only recall being so angry at Clarence for not listening to me. I probably scolded him for a long time and slapped him several times. In the end, I sat on the side of the road, crying, begging him not to bother me anymore. The wedding certificate he'd worked so hard to piece together was torn apart again by me. And after that, Clarence truly never appeared in front of me again. The next day, his parents called in to excuse him from school. They said he would study at home for the last month before graduation. Though I was a bit surprised, I felt more of a sense of relief. It wasn't until graduation that I heard from my parents about what happened to Clarence. On the way home that evening, he was distracted and caused a car accident. He had been cooperating with the treatment, so there was a chance he could recover in time for the college entrance exam. But he became so negative that he even refused to take his medication. His mom even called my mom before the exam, hoping I could go talk to him. After hearing that, my dad grabbed the phone from her hand. "If he wants to ruin himself, don't drag my daughter into this." Clearly, he was still angry about the public breakup. I got into a prestigious university with excellent grades. The day I received my admission letter, I got a message from an unfamiliar number. "Congratulations on your bright future." It was the most formal message, and I immediately knew it was from Clarence. I didn't feel much of anything, simply blocked the number without a second thought. Breathing in the hot air, my heart was strangely calm. In my mind, everything from the past 6 months replayed like scenes in a movie, each frame more intense than the last. In the end, everything culminated at my graduation ceremony. Some got what they deserved. Some regretted their past choices. As for me, I got what I deserved. I held my admission letter in my hand, gazing at the direction of my future university. I knew my life was just beginning. The end.